Hi, I'm Maris Holt, the daughter who paid everyone's bills and the same woman my mother left standing in the rain because this isn't a shelter. How do you go from being the glue that held a family together to the name no one dares mention? At Sunday dinner, it started with one fire. But what burned wasn't just a house. It was every illusion I had about love, loyalty, and what it really means to be family. "You're not welcome here," my mother said, arms crossed in a silk robe while my sister sipped wine and looked away. And that's when I realized I wasn't being punished for walking away. I was being punished for finally saying no. Have you ever been so useful to people that they forgot you were also human? What happens when you stop giving and start choosing yourself? This is the story of what they erased and what I rebuilt. Before we go on, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We bring you new stories every day. Hit like and let us know what city you're watching from in the comments. I still remember that one Sunday. I must have been 12. I folded the dinner napkins into little maple leaves, watched a YouTube tutorial and everything. I even ironed them so the creases looked real. When I placed them carefully around the table, hoping for a smile, Miranda just looked down and muttered, "Why do you always have to overdo everything?" Then she called for Delaney to bring out the dessert. She praised the pie. My napkins were forgotten. Funny how moments like that never really leave you. The house was gone. I parked 2 blocks away because the road was still taped off. Fire trucks had come and gone. The air reeked of wet wood, and something darker like a memory burned alive. Black skeletons of beams jutted out of what used to be a living room. The porch had collapsed inward, and the white paint that once made it look quaint now streaked in grey ash across scorched bricks. The house I paid for. The home my family lived in rent-free while I lived in a studio apartment 4 miles away, just in case they ever needed me. Miranda used to say that. No one called me, not when it caught fire, not when the insurance adjuster came, not when the Red Cross arrived. I called them. Miranda picked up on the 3rd ring. Her voice had the tone of someone mildly inconvenienced. "It's all gone," she said flatly. "The fridge, the china set, Delaney's photos, nothing left." I waited for a pause for the words, "Thank you for keeping the insurance up to date, for wiring the premiums all those years." Instead, she added, "Delaney says it was faulty wiring. We told you years ago that place needed work." I drove back to my studio only to find the entire hallway underwater. A fire in the next building had triggered the sprinklers again. My carpets were soaked, the air thick with mildew. I stood there for 2 hours in the smell before my knees gave out and I sat on the floor. No one to call, no one who'd come. So I drove to Upper Saddle River. The rain made it worse, icy, insistent, and personal. By the time I turned into the long stone driveway, my jeans clung to me like skin. I barely remembered to take the keys out of the ignition. I rang the bell once. Miranda opened the door, half in shadow, arms crossed. She wore one of those silk house robes that looked expensive and cold. The foyer behind her glowed with warm lighting, and Delaney stood by the kitchen island in a cashmere wrap nursing a glass of wine. She saw me, said nothing. "I just need a few nights," I whispered, "until I figure something out." Miranda exhaled sharp and slow. "This isn't a shelter, Maris. You're not some refugee." I swallowed. "Just until I can find another apartment. Ask one of those charities you donate to, or one of the cousins you covered tuition for." She gestured vaguely behind her. "Try using all that generosity for yourself." Delaney didn't move, just tilted her head slightly as if watching a rerun she had already seen a dozen times. I didn't beg. I turned back into the rain, the cold so deep it started to feel like armor. I sat in my car, engine off, windshield fogging. Drops rolled down my cheeks, and I wasn't sure if they were rain or me. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. I waited 5 minutes. 10. Nobody followed, nobody texted. I had transferred $1,200 to Delaney 2 weeks ago for her emergency vet bill, bought groceries for my parents every Thanksgiving, covered Russell's cholesterol medication for the last 2 years without a word. I pulled out of the driveway slowly, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know where else to go. By the time I reached Route 17, my thoughts weren't even thoughts anymore. just facts, rearranging themselves into sharper truths. They hadn't just forgotten me, they had deleted me. I was useful until I wasn't, until I needed something, until I showed up wet, cold, and asking. At a dingy motel behind a gas station, I handed over my ID and credit card. The man at the desk didn't even blink. He just slid the key toward me like this was normal. The room smelled of bleach and something lemony, like the motel wanted to seem clean but couldn't quite mask the truth. I didn't even take off my shoes. Just lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. My eyes stayed open long after midnight. Not from fear, from clarity. At 4:12 in the morning, I picked up my phone and logged into each account one by one. Bank of America, Chase, PayPal, even Zelle. I began disabling cards, cancelled automatic payments, paused every account tied to anyone but me. I stared at one transfer, a recurring monthly deposit to my mother's account labeled household. I deleted it. Each click felt like shedding an old skin, a bad contract I never signed but had followed for years. I've been their backbone, I said out loud. My voice sounded strange, calm, clean. Now let's see how they stand without one. And just as the sun rose, my phone lit up. 69 missed calls. The first thing I heard wasn't birds or traffic. It was the buzz of my phone vibrating so hard on the nightstand, it nearly danced off the edge. I didn't need to pick it up to know it had started. I sat up slowly, bones aching from that lumpy motel mattress, and glanced at the screen. 69 missed calls, 18 from Miranda, 22 from Griffin, 11 from Delaney. A scattering from Russell, my cousin Taryn, and even Ruth Fenley, the neighbour who once borrowed my crockpot and never gave it back. And there it was, dead centre, in the preview of the most recent text, Maris. Call me right now. Don't you dare cut off the mortgage autopay. Not are you okay, not where did you sleep, not I'm sorry, just panic, over money. I let the phone fall back onto the thin blanket beside me. The room was stale, the kind of air that never fully aired out. But I breathed easier in it than I had on my mother's front porch. I lay back for a while, staring up at the ceiling's water-stained tiles, letting my muscles finally unclench. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't lonely. It was honest. Nobody had called me until the money stopped. That said everything. I finally got up and turned off all notifications. I wasn't interested in the pleading. Not until they learned how to say the truth out loud. I showered with what the motel offered, a bar of soap the size of a hotel mint and a towel that smelled like bleach and despair. But I emerged clean, clear-headed. Dressed in the cleanest jeans, I had a black tee and the navy blazer I'd stashed in my trunk out of habit. It still smelled faintly of lavender, a trace left from a client meeting last fall. I looked at myself in the mirror, tired eyes, but not broken. By 9:20, I was pulling into the parking lot of a co-working space I hadn't visited in over a year. I used to donate a few $1,000s each quarter to support their community room quiet space for freelance folks, young grads building apps that never launched. I'd never used it myself, until today. The receptionist glanced up and blinked in surprise. Maris, wow. Haven't seen you since the panel talk. Want a desk? I nodded. Yeah, that would be great. She didn't ask why I had no laptop bag, no briefcase. She just walked me back and offered me a seat by the window. That small act felt more like family than anything I'd gotten in the last 24 hours. I pulled out my tablet connected to the Wi-Fi and got to work. Quietly, methodically. First, the shared family phone plan, gone. Next, I logged into the trust I'd built, yes, I built, with the help of a law friend years ago to protect family assets. I removed myself from management. No warning, no explanation. Then came the car lease. Miranda's second car. The silver one she said she deserved because she had given up so much raising us. The lease I'd signed for her in a moment of guilt. Click. Cancelled. I didn't smile. I just breathed. I was flagging a fourth auto payment, Russell's magazine subscriptions and satellite radio, when my phone lit up with a new call. Griffin this time. I picked up. Maris, he said quickly, voice tight with urgency. You've made your point. Now stop this. You know Mom didn't mean it like that. She said it, I answered, while I stood there dripping wet and homeless. A beat of silence. She panicked. She's old school, you know how she is. I didn't respond. Griffin continued tone shifting like he was reading from a tired script. Delaney told me about the house. We thought you were stronger than this. That stopped me. You knew, when did the fire happen, Griffin? Night before last. Funny, I only found out yesterday, when I showed up to Ash and Rain. He hesitated. I thought Delaney told you. Look, we didn't think you'd break like this. There it was, the sentence that made everything tilt sideways. Not we forgot, not we're sorry. We didn't think you'd break, as if I was just a machine that had finally malfunctioned. I ended the call. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just sat there at the co-working desk staring at the tree swaying outside the window. That was all I needed to hear. I wasn't forgotten. I was invisible by design. I spent the next hour at the bank. My longtime manager Trent greeted me with his usual calm nod. He didn't say much. He never did. But I could tell he understood. Every financial file, every document I'd once created to help my family, he helped me dismantle, quietly, respectfully. When I stepped back out into the grey afternoon, something inside me felt looser, like I'd unbuckled an old tight belt that had been digging into my ribs for far too many years. I stopped by a food truck near the edge of the co-working lot, grabbed a tuna sandwich and a coffee, then headed back to the motel. The roads were damp again. Clouds hung low and thick, but I drove without music, without thoughts, just the soft buzz inside my head. Back at the room, I sat down on the bed and opened the sandwich but didn't take a bite. I looked around at the crooked lampshade, the carpet that hadn't seen a vacuum in what looked like weeks, the bolted-down TV with its faint outline of cleaner around the edges. And then, almost without thinking, I folded the napkin that had come with my sandwich, not out of nostalgia but instinct, into a little maple leaf. I placed it gently on the motel pillow just like I used to do all those years ago. Only this time, I wasn't hoping anyone would notice. I wasn't part of the family, I said aloud, to no one in particular. I was the funding model. I lay back, still fully clothed, letting the weight of everything settle into the thin mattress beneath me. And just as I began drifting into that hazy place between waking and sleep, my phone buzzed once. A single text from Delaney. No apology, just 6 words. You should know. Mum lawyered up. Delaney's text came in just past midnight. I was lying on the motel bed, eyes half closed, listening to the low hum of the heater, kicking on and off, on and off. The screen lit up like it had something important to announce. They're spinning it already. Watch your back. And don't come by. That was it. Not I'm sorry, not I didn't know, not even are you okay, just a warning, one that carried the cold, measured weight of quiet betrayal. She wasn't siding with me, she wasn't standing up to them. She was just giving me a heads up, like a coworker whispering before a boardroom ambush. I read it 5 times, then turned the screen off. It wasn't until the next morning that I truly understood what she meant. After brushing my teeth with a travel toothbrush I'd picked up at the gas station, I sat down at the tiny desk in the corner of the motel room. My laptop had 1 bar of Wi-Fi. That was all I needed. I opened the browser and typed in the name of the neighborhood Facebook group I knew Miranda still used, mostly to brag about Delaney's volunteer work or Griffin's latest real estate ventures. And there it was, pinned right at the top. Prayers up for the family at Sycamore Drive. They've suffered enough, losing their home, their support system. No one deserves this kind of betrayal from within. My eyes stopped on one of the comments underneath. I heard the daughter who'd been funding them just cut them off. No warning, heartless. I guess some people forget blood ties when the money runs dry. I stared at that sentence for a full minute. Then I closed the laptop. Because it wasn't a surprise. Not really. Not after Delaney's text, not after Miranda's silence that first night. They needed a villain, and I was convenient the daughter who was too independent, too cold, the one who didn't show up to enough family dinners or drop everything to babysit. I was no longer useful, so they rewrote the story. I wasn't the one who had kept the lights on, or paid the mortgage when Russell retired early to pursue his dream of writing a book he never even started. No, now I was the saboteur. The traitor. I needed air. I threw on my coat, tucked my laptop under my arm, and stepped outside. The chill hit sharper than I expected, like the air itself didn't want me here. I walked without any destination in mind, just letting my boots strike the pavement until I found myself standing in front of the public library. It was warm inside, quiet in a way that felt like sanctuary. I took a seat near the window, opened my laptop again, but didn't type. My hands just rested there. Maris, I looked up. It took me a second to recognize her. The grey curls now softer, but the same sharp cheekbones and smart, thoughtful eyes. Aunt Lisa. Well, technically she was my mother's cousin, but everyone called her Aunt. She had never been one to meddle, never one to flatter. She just saw things. I hadn't heard from her in years. I thought that was you, she said, holding 2 paper cups of tea. You look tired, I let out a small laugh. That's generous. We moved to a corner room, usually reserved for tutors and book clubs. She handed me a cup. No small talk, just a long, knowing look. Your mum used to talk about you all the time, she said finally. Said you were distant, cold even, too practical. I blinked. Even when I bought her that car. She sipped her tea. Especially then. She said Maris doesn't hug, but she'll hand you the keys to a Lexus. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I thought she was proud of me. Oh, she was. Liza set her cup down. Proud of your usefulness, not your heart. Never your heart. She liked saying you were the responsible one, but that was just code for the one we can lean on without guilt. Something cracked open in me. All these years, I thought if I just kept giving quietly, consistently, they'd finally see me. Not as a bank account, not as a fallback, but as their daughter, their sister, their family. But they never wanted my love. They wanted my resources. The lie they told everyone else was that I was distant, uncaring, too business-minded. But the lie they loved, the one that made everything easier for them, was this: that I owed them affection in the form of money. That if I didn't give, I didn't love. And that any boundary I set was cruelty. I thanked Aunt Liza for the tea and stepped out into the late afternoon light. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to text Delaney back either. Instead, I walked. A few blocks later, I found myself outside Delaney's gated neighborhood. I hadn't even realized what I was doing there until I saw the stone pillars and the blinking call box beside the gate. I walked closer. A security guard noticed me and leaned toward the intercom. You here for Delaney? I stood there for 3 seconds. No, I said. Then I turned around. Because I wasn't there to beg. I wasn't hoping for some last-minute redemption arc. I just needed to see it to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining things that I wasn't welcome anymore. If I ever had been, I was never going to be the sister who dropped by unannounced and got waved through the gate like I belonged. The wind picked up as I headed back toward town. My hands were freezing, but I didn't shove them in my coat pockets. I wanted to feel it, the cold, the weight of it. By the time I reached the co-working space, dusk had settled. The girl at the front desk didn't ask for identification. She just smiled softly and buzzed me in. Maybe she remembered me. Maybe she just saw the look on my face and knew not to question it. I sat down at a desk by the window, opened a blank document, titled it, What I Paid For, and I started typing. Not to rage, not to get even, just to record, line by line, what I paid for, what I was promised, what was taken, every mortgage, every tuition check, every quiet forgiveness. Every time I swallowed the urge to say, this isn't fair, I wrote until my fingers ached. Then I formatted the email. I blind carbon copied every cousin who had ever asked me for a loan. To the church committee that Miranda used to parade me in front of, like I was some kind of charity trophy. To the investment club that Russell introduced me to as our golden goose. And finally, to Delaney. At the very bottom of the email, I typed a single line: you cannot disown someone you never truly welcomed. My hand hovered over the mouse, but I hadn't hit send yet because someone knocked on the motel door. The knock wasn't timid, it had weight. The kind of knock that carried years of being told to stay quiet and give more. I set my laptop aside and stepped toward the door. Peered through the peephole. There she was, Miranda, standing under the yellow flicker of the hallway light. Rain plastered her scarf to her neck. Her coat clung to her frame like armor. She wasn't shivering, she wasn't sorry, she was furious. I cracked the door slowly, still unsure if I had hallucinated the knock, the image. Her eyes narrowed. We need to talk. Now. I opened the door wide enough for her to enter. She brushed past me without waiting for an invitation. Her heels clicked sharply against the thin motel carpet like a clock, counting down to something I wasn't prepared for. Once inside, she turned to face me, arms crossed, still clutching her purse like it held the last ounce of control she hadn't lost. You've created a disaster, she said, not even bothering to soften the blow. We've had to delay Delaney's mortgage. Your father can't show his face at church without people whispering. He's humiliated. I stood still, hands at my sides, letting her words echo and fall like loose bricks. I didn't say anything. She stepped closer. Do you even understand what you've done? And then she said it, the part that slid straight into my chest and settled like ice. This isn't about the money. It's about how you've made us look. Not about love, not about pain, not about betrayal or hurt. About optics. I blinked. That's what matters to you, I asked her, my voice soft, almost too quiet to hear. She rolled her eyes. People talk. They assume things. I nodded slowly. Let them. She flinched, like I had slapped her. I took a breath. The silence between us thickened, not new, old, familiar. It settled between our bodies like something we had always carried but never named. It wasn't anger I felt, it was clarity. For years I had said I gave you whatever you needed. Not because they asked kindly, but because I believed deep down that someday they would finally see me. Not for what I gave, but for who I was. She said nothing. I've been funding appearances, not people. That stops now. She let out a short laugh, sharp and bitter. So what now? You want us to crawl, to beg you? No, I said. I want you to manage the way I always had to. Alone. Quietly. Without thanks. Her face twisted. You think you're better than us? I looked her directly in the eye. No. I just finally stopped pretending I'm less. That landed. Hit her straight. She picked up her purse like a judge closing court. You've changed. No, I said. I just finally stopped apologizing for not being Delaney. Her hand hesitated on the doorknob, like she wanted to say something more, maybe even something real. But old habits die hard. Instead, she gave me one last look, one I couldn't decipher. Rage, maybe, or regret buried too deep to reach. Then she left. The door clicked shut behind her. I stood there for a moment, letting the stillness return. I wasn't surprised, not really, but something inside me had shifted, solidified. After rinsing my face in the tiny sink, I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. The rain had thinned to a mist, soft, indifferent. Across the street, a neon diner sign buzzed dimly. I walked toward it. Inside the warmth was instant vinyl booths, old jazz, murmuring from a dusty speaker, and a waitress who didn't ask questions. She brought me coffee and a plate of pancakes I hadn't ordered. But I ate them anyway. I sat in silence, surrounded by strangers who didn't know who I used to be or who I had just become. And that anonymity, it felt kind. It felt merciful. Have you ever realized the people you loved most only valued what you gave them and not who you are? If yes, comment the number 1 below. Let's talk about it in the comments. When the check came, the waitress smiled and slid it across the table. It's been taken care of, she said like an afterthought. A man paid for it before you walked in, left a note. She placed a folded napkin down. I opened it slowly, my fingers unsure, almost reluctant. You were never invisible. That's all it said. I looked up startled, but the booth near the window was empty. Whoever it was, he was gone. Still holding the note, I pressed it into my coat pocket like it meant more than anything I'd heard in the last 20 years. Back in my motel room, the air felt different. Not lighter, but mine. I opened my laptop, clicked through my accounts. There it was, an attempted withdrawal from the old joint account I had once foolishly shared with Miranda. Denied. I reset every password, locked everything down, tighter than ever. Then I returned to the email I'd written the night before, the one blind copy to every relative, every pastor, every family friend, every investment partner. The people who had always smiled at me but only saw what I could give. I read it through one last time, and then I hit send. By morning, the family group chat exploded. And this time, I didn't look away. By morning, the chat lit up like someone had tossed gasoline onto a pile of old dry grudges. First, Delaney. Her name popped up in bold. Delaney, what the hell is wrong with you? Then Mum, just as sharp. Mum called me back. Immediately. Dad just seen. No reply, of course. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, scrolling through their outrage with the same detachment I'd have reading someone else's weather report. Cold front coming through. Sure, I'd already been living in it. Then the screen blinked. Delaney was calling. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I picked up. What do you want? I asked flatly. Her voice cracked right out of the gate. You ruined everything she said, trembling somewhere between fury and panic. The bank's refusing to extend the credit line. Mom hasn't stopped crying since last night. Dad had to cancel his meeting with the realtor. I didn't respond. Just let her fill the space with the mess they had made. You made us depend on you, she continued. And then you just walked away like none of it mattered. That was the sentence. The one that did it. I leaned back, the phone cradled between cheek and shoulder. No, I said, quiet but firm. You chose to depend on me. I never asked for that. You built your plans around my silence, not my consent. She fell quiet, for a second. But I heard her breathing shift. Frustration turning into something deeper. Then, like a dam breaking, the words spilled out. I didn't have a choice, Maris. You had the credit. I needed the mortgage. You said you'd help. And just like that, I was back there. 2 years ago, I'd flown in for a short visit. Delaney picked me up from the airport, bubbly and rehearsed. There'd been something in her voice too upbeat, too polished. We're meeting with a real estate agent, she said casually, like she was inviting me to lunch. I remember parking outside a townhouse just outside Atlanta. Brick, clean lines. Backyard so pristine it looked like it had been printed. Delaney turned to me, eyes wide with a strange mix of hope and calculation. Look, she said, I can cover the payments. I need a cosigner. Just to help me qualify. I hesitated. Something about it didn't sit right. Then Mum chimed in, over speakerphone, as if she'd been rehearsing that line all morning. Don't be selfish, she said. She's your sister. That sentence had always worked on me. Until it didn't. So I signed. I didn't live there. I didn't visit. But I paid the difference whenever Delaney's checks ran tight. And every time I asked what happened to her freelance jobs or why Dad wasn't helping, I got the same answer. It's complicated. No, it wasn't. It was simple. I had been funding pride disguised as crisis. And now back in that motel room with her voice still in my ear, I saw it all for what it really was. You want me to fix it? I asked. There was a long pause. She's having a breakdown, Delaney said, quieter now. Mom's doctor said, her blood pressure. I cut her off. She's just now breaking down. After 6 years of me covering bills, sleeping in my car some nights, and being told I was the cold one, I didn't get a doctor. I didn't get breakdown privileges. I just got ignored. The line went quiet. Then click. She hung up. I let the phone fall onto the bed screen, facing up like it still had something else to say. But all I could hear was the hum of the cheap motel fridge kicking on and off like it couldn't decide how much it cared to try. I was halfway through brushing my teeth when the motel phone rang. Not my cell. The old beige landline next to the bed. I picked it up. Ms. Holt front desk. There's a delivery for you. A delivery envelope. Courier dropped it off about 5 minutes ago. I blinked at my reflection. My towel was still draped over my shoulders. I'd been planning to shower, maybe nap, not face anyone for the rest of the morning. But now I threw on jeans, a hoodie, twisted my hair into a low bun, and headed downstairs. The envelope was thick. No name on the outside, just my room number written in a slanted cursive like someone in a rush. The clerk didn't ask questions. I didn't offer any answers. Back in my room, I peeled it open slowly. Inside folded papers, crisp, an old insurance header in the corner. At first I thought it was a mistake. Then I saw the date, right after the fire. My name had been typed on the beneficiary line, then crossed out. A newer name scribbled in Delaney's. There wasn't even an attempt to hide it. Just ink over ink. Correction fluid, sloppy. I stared at it for a long time. My fingers traced the outline of where my name used to be. So that was it. I hadn't just been abandoned after the fire. I'd been erased long before the flames ever touched the walls. I sat back on the motel bed, the envelope still open beside me, like a wound that had stopped bleeding, but left an ache that would not go away. The documents were old, the kind you could smell, the kind that yellow at the edges, but it was the handwriting that held me still. Right there in slanted blue ink, my name had been listed as the original beneficiary. Then just below it, crossed out, a single line, almost casual. Beneath it, my father's signature. Not typed, not notarized, just him. And a pen, like he was scratching out a mistake on a grocery list. The new beneficiary, Delaney. I didn't shake with anger. It wasn't rage anymore. It was something quieter, more final. Like the sound a door makes when it clicks shut behind you and you realize there is no key on your side. 2 years ago, I remembered there had been this red binder Mum handed me after a plumbing issue had almost flooded their kitchen. She had been unusually cheerful that day. Just in case anything happened, she said, handing it to me like it was a casserole. I had offered to digitize it, make sure it was all backed up. But she smiled and waved her hand. No need. We've got it sorted. Back then, I believed her. Thought maybe, just maybe, I was being trusted. Included. Counted. Turns out they had already made other plans that didn't include me. I didn't need more feelings, not another wave of betrayal to cry into a motel pillow about. I needed answers, I needed facts. By noon, I was pulling into a narrow parking spot near the county records office downtown. The building itself was unimpressive, peeling beige paint, humming fluorescent lights, and a ceiling fan that turned lazily, moving no real air. I approached the clerk behind a thick glass window. Her nameplate read Deborah, and she looked like someone who had seen her fair share of people trying to pull fast ones. "Hi," I said, trying to sound calm and professional. "I'm here to request a copy of an insurance claim filed about 5 weeks ago. It was for a residential fire on Linton Avenue. I believe I'm on the policy." Deborah raised an eyebrow. "Fire claims are sensitive. Only listed beneficiaries or authorized agents can access those." I slid the document from the envelope across the counter. My name was on the original paperwork. "This came in the mail this morning." She took it, adjusted her glasses, and frowned. After a moment, she disappeared into the back. 5 minutes ticked by, then 10. When she returned, she held a stapled set of pages in one hand and a crease between her brows. There was an amendment filed 3 weeks before the fire. She glanced at me. Beneficiary was updated to a Camille Holt. She paused. "You're not listed anywhere now." My voice came out even. "That's all I needed to know. Thank you." I walked back to my car, closed the door gently, and sat there for a few minutes without moving. My palms rested on the steering wheel. It wasn't just silence inside the car, it was the absence of illusion, of hope. Halfway back to the motel, my phone buzzed. Delaney. Her name lit up the screen like a warning flare. I didn't answer, but the message popped through anyway. "Maris, you're being cruel. We're family. You're overreacting. Overreacting." I should have laughed. But I didn't. I just kept driving. Eyes forward, one hand tightening on the wheel. At the next intersection, I made an unexpected turn. The lot where the house used to stand hadn't changed much since the fire. The boards were still up, charred beams stacked in uneven piles. The smell was long gone. But the weight remained like grief that had dried, but never really faded. I parked across the street and walked slowly toward the blackened frame. No one stopped me. No neighbors peeked out. Just me, the wind, and what used to be home. Carefully, I stepped over a collapsed beam, picking my way through the ruins. Glass crunched under my shoes. The porch had disintegrated, but the remnants of the living room were still vaguely recognizable: burnt sofa springs, a twisted floor lamp, and part of the wall where our family photos used to hang. Something glinted near the rubble. I leaned down. A picture frame scorched along the edges, its glass cracked diagonally. Inside a photo from years ago, just me and Mum standing in front of that same house. I must have been 12, maybe 13, holding a watering can. Mum had her arm around me. The image had browned around the sides, heat mottled, but our faces were still visible. And it hit me. Not just the betrayal of paperwork of signatures of crossed-out names, but this. Even the photo had been left behind to burn. I stood there a moment longer, staring at what had once been so precious. Then I picked it up, brushed off the soot with my sleeve and held it tightly. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just turned away and left the ashes behind for good this time. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I pulled into the motel parking lot. The evening sun was already softening into a dusky gold. I sat there in the car a little longer, staring out at nothing, fingers resting loosely on the steering wheel. I wasn't thinking about the ashes anymore, not about the photo, not about Delaney's message, not even about the house. Something had settled inside me. A stillness. But it didn't feel empty, it just felt finished. Back in the motel room, I dropped the keys on the nightstand and pulled my old laptop from the duffel bag under the bed. It creaked when I opened it, the hinge catching the same way it had for years. The screen flickered on, bringing up the same familiar folder I had used for 6 years' family expenses. I clicked the spreadsheet open. Every line was still there. Every check I had ever written, every online transfer. Cell phone bills when Delaney lost her job, rent when Mom said her pension check came late. Groceries, school fees for Delaney's son when they insisted public school was not an option. Even their gas cards, all logged, dates, amounts, brief notes. A part of me had kept it out of duty. Another part maybe out of desperation to prove I was worth something. 143-77058. I said the number out loud. It didn't echo, but it landed, heavy in the room. Then I opened my banking app. By the time the sun was fully up, I was parked downtown in front of the old brick building with iron-framed windows, the main branch of my family's credit union. The same place my parents had set up our first joint account when I was 19 and still believed their promises meant something. Inside, the chill of the air conditioning hit my arms. A bank manager, mid-50s, greeted me behind a glass partition. I'd like to freeze and close all accounts associated with these routing and linked numbers, I said, sliding the paperwork across the desk. He looked up, blinking. These are joint accounts with your mother and sister. Yes, I replied, calm as glass. And here's the documentation. You'll see patterns of unauthorized withdrawals, inconsistent signatures, and 3 wire transfers made in my name without consent. His brow furrowed as he flipped through the pages. He didn't ask if I was sure. 10 minutes later, he returned. It's done. The accounts are frozen, all outgoing transactions halted. Credit lines locked. Any cards tied to them will now be declined. I gave a small nod. Thank you. On the way out, I walked past a young couple arguing in the ATM line. I didn't stop. I didn't feel guilty. For once, I didn't feel anything but focused. Back in the car, I sat with the laptop open on the passenger seat, fingers hovering over the touchpad. I scrolled down to a highlighted line, April 22nd, wire to Delaney. $4,000. Colby lost job. I remembered that night like it had just happened. Delaney sobbing on the phone, voice cracking, telling me they were about to lose the house. I hadn't questioned it. I had opened my account and sent the money before dinner. I ate cereal for 3 days afterward. Couldn't pay rent on time. Now staring at that same line, I didn't feel shame. I moved the cursor over it, clicked delete row. Gone. My phone buzzed. Maris, it's Jules. Came the voice of my attorney when I answered. He never wasted time on pleasantries. Just a heads up, Delaney and her husband filed a countersuit. I rubbed my temple. Let me guess. Wrongful abandonment. Bingo. It's a flimsy filing, emotional distress, financial disruption. You know, all the things they never had a problem putting on your shoulders. I let out a quiet laugh. Let them explain to a judge how the abandoned daughter paid off their back taxes and helped fund their kitchen remodel. He chuckled too. Exactly. I'm not worried, but I thought you should know. Thanks. Keep me posted. I ended the call, tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, and exhaled slowly. By late afternoon, the sky had dimmed. The wind picked up again. I had stopped by a cafe for tea, then checked into a new motel cleaner, quieter. While the kettle hissed, I heard the phone vibrate once. Twice. Then it wouldn't stop. I glanced at the screen. 14 missed calls, then 23, then 39. It was like a dam had burst. Delaney, Colby, Mum, even Uncle Don. Voicemails poured in. I let them all go to inbox. For a moment, I stared at the screen before hitting play. Maris, what are you doing? I just tried to get groceries and the card didn't work. Call me back. Another, your mother's account is frozen. What is happening? Are you punishing us? Then one came from Delaney, her voice sharper than before. You can't do this. You owe us. After everything we've done for you. I stared at the wall, expressionless. Then I turned the phone off. I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore. But I did owe one person myself. I stepped away from the ringing phone and let the silence settle. The motel room had gone dim, the sun fading behind stained blinds. My palms were still warm from holding the last voicemail. But inside I felt cold, steady, not angry, just done. That night I barely slept. Not because I was restless, but because my mind was sorting through years of mess, like an attic being cleared out box by box. Around 6:30, I pushed the covers off, brewed the motel's burnt coffee, and opened my laptop again. I knew what I needed to see. The fire report had finally gone public. I searched the department's database, typed in the address I knew by heart, and pulled up the document. My pulse didn't even spike. It wasn't faulty wiring like Delaney had told everyone, not some mysterious freak accident like Miranda had always hinted over the years. It was a space heater left running in Delaney's old room. They never told me that. Not once. They let me believe I had left behind something broken, that I was careless, that if I had just been around more, none of it would have happened. But it had nothing to do with me. It was their neglect. And they buried the truth the same way they tried to bury me. I let the laptop rest against my legs and stared out the window. The air outside felt cooler than usual, cleaner, like it had just rained, even though it hadn't. For a long moment, my mind drifted back to the first day I moved into that house. 10 years ago, almost to the week, I had just graduated from community college. No party, no cake, just a car full of plastic tubs and a grateful heart. I remembered painting the walls in that little side room myself pale green. I chose the color because it reminded me of new leaves, new beginnings. I set up a desk next to the window right beside the heater, the same heater they promised to replace. We'll get to it next month, Miranda had said, tying her hair back with a rubber band as she passed by the doorway. She never looked up from her phone. They never fixed it. Winter came, I used extra blankets. Summer came, I barely used the room because it got stuffy. The heater stayed, and now that same heater was the origin of the fire, and they never even mentioned it. They just scrubbed me out like a mistake. I closed the laptop and got dressed slowly. Nothing fancy, just jeans and a clean shirt. But I tucked my spreadsheet printout into my bag. I didn't know yet where I was going. But something in me needed to walk, to breathe, to understand all the ways I had been erased, and to choose intentionally not to disappear. I ended up at the public library. A short walk. The air was brisk but not unkind. Inside it was quiet, safe. "Hi," I said to the archivist at the front desk. "I'm looking for any local news stories from 7 months ago. There was a house fire on Maple Drive." She nodded and disappeared behind a short wall of shelves. A few minutes later, she slid a thin folder onto the table where I waited. And there it was. Local family displaced eldest daughter to the rescue. The headline slapped me harder than I expected. The article was glowing. Delaney had set up a GoFundMe, raised $22,000 in 3 days. According to the write-up, there were photos of her, of my parents, even of the charred remains of the front porch. They smiled in front of it, arms around each other, like survivors of a war. But I wasn't mentioned. Not once. Not even a footnote. I read it twice just to be sure. It was like someone had taken a red pen and crossed me out of the narrative entirely. Not dead, not missing, just deleted. I whispered to myself, barely louder than breath. I didn't just walk away. They erased me. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I stood, my back ached and the weight in my chest had settled into something solid. Instead of returning to the motel, I drove to the cemetery. The grass was overgrown in places, but I found the plot easily. My maternal grandmother, Del Mare. She was the only one who had ever made me feel like I wasn't a burden. When I was 12 and Delaney had the flu, it was Grandma who stayed up with me all night, helping me finish my science fair volcano. She told me my mind was worth protecting, and that people would try to convince me otherwise. I knelt beside her stone and sat for a long while. "I know you'd say not to fight fire with fire," I murmured, eyes fixed on the worn lettering. "But you'd also say, don't let them burn your name for warmth, baby." I pulled out a photo, one I had kept hidden for years. It was me and Grandma Del Mar at the zoo. She had cotton candy on her cheek. I was laughing a big gap where my front teeth should have been. I sealed the photo in a clear plastic sleeve and taped it carefully to the back of her marker. A small act, but it felt like closing a door without needing to slam it shut. As the afternoon faded, I drove to a small building tucked off the main road, beige, citing a red door, second floor, no elevator. But it was mine. I unlocked the apartment. The space was humble, bare white walls, a chipped counter in the kitchen, but it smelled clean. Like possibility, like air after rain. I placed my bag down and reached inside. Out came the old spreadsheet. Every dollar I had spent on that family. Every illusion I had mistaken for love. I laid it gently on the empty dining table and scribbled a new title on top, Proof of Love. And I knew, standing there in that quiet room with nothing but a single bag and my own name on the lease, that love without respect was never love at all. It was just debt, disguised, wrapped in guilt and silence. I was folding the last of my clean towels, still warm from the dryer, when I heard it. 3 firm knocks. No doorbell. Just a pause, then 2 more. I glanced through the peephole. Delaney. No heavy eyeliner, no gold hoops. Her hair was tied back in a limp ponytail. She looked older than she had a week ago, tight around the mouth like she had been biting her words for days. I cracked the door, didn't move back, just looked her in the eye. She didn't blink. "We need to talk," she said. I didn't say yes. I just grabbed my jacket and keys and pulled the door shut behind me. We walked in silence to a small cafe around the corner. Not the kind with waitstaff, just a counter and a few worn booths. I nodded at the barista and slid into a booth near the window. Delaney sat across from me, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. "Mom's losing it," she said, eyes fixed on a chipped sugar jar. "She's convinced you're out to destroy her. Dad barely talks. He just stares at the garage door, like it'll open and you'll walk in." I stirred my coffee slowly, letting the silence breathe. Delaney's voice cracked. "They think you're punishing them. But the truth is, you were the glue. You were the only one keeping anything upright." She let out a bitter laugh. "And we kicked you out like you were a burden." I met her eyes. "I know." She blinked rapidly, looked away. "Do you want us to beg? Fine." She pressed her palms to the table like she was steadying herself for impact. "I'm begging, please, just help, one more time." I set my coffee down. The clink was sharper than I expected. "No." Delaney froze. I didn't raise my voice, didn't flinch, because it was never, "one more time, Delaney." It was always the next time, and the one after that. "You don't see me, you just see what I can give." For a moment she looked like she might argue, but no words came, just a shallow breath, and the wet shine of pride slipping out of her eyes. We paid separately. I walked ahead as we left. No goodbye. 3 nights earlier, I had written a letter I never intended to send. I was sitting on the floor of my new apartment, wrapped in a blanket with a metal mixing bowl and a box of matches beside me. The letter was simple, no accusations, no demands. I loved you enough to carry everyone I wrote. Now I love myself enough to let go. I folded it once. Then again, lit a match, watched the flame curl the paper inward until the words crumbled to ash. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like sweeping the last soot from the windowsill. Back in the cafe, a young woman in a brown apron brought over my receipt. She looked barely 25, freckles scattered across her cheeks. "You have a calm way of speaking," she said almost shyly. "I wish I had that strength." I smiled just a little. I didn't have it. I built it. She nodded like she understood without needing anything explained, then walked off to clear a nearby table. I left a generous tip and stepped outside. The light had softened into that late afternoon gold, filtering through the trees, like everything around me had taken a long, quiet breath. My phone buzzed. Voicemail, Miranda. I didn't hesitate. Deleted. No guilt, no second thought. The walk back to my apartment was silent in a peaceful kind of way, just the hum of passing cars, the rustle of leaves in the wind, and the steady rhythm of my own footsteps. On the kitchen counter, a white envelope waited. It was from the non-profit I had applied to last month, back when I still wasn't sure I had anything left to give. Dear Maris, we're thrilled to welcome you as our newest financial literacy mentor. Your experience and insight will help women regain control of their futures. I stood still for a long moment, hands resting on the edge of the counter. The apartment was modest second-hand furniture, soft yellow light from the window. One potted plant I hadn't managed to kill, but it was mine, fully mine. I tucked the letter into a folder labeled "Start Here," then walked to the center of the room. There were no framed degrees, no family photos, just a quiet hum of peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for the next crisis. I wasn't holding my breath, waiting for another knock on the door or a phone call demanding pieces of me I could no longer give. If the knock came, I would answer, but I would not hand over my peace again. Not for guilt, not for history, not even for blood. I didn't walk away bitter. I walked away whole. I walked away with both hands empty and still felt full. I walked away knowing that love without boundaries was not love. It was obligation. It was sacrifice masquerading as devotion. And that day I chose something different. I chose me. And if you've ever stood on the edge of that same decision between being the savior or simply saving yourself, then maybe you understand. You do not have to earn the right to breathe peacefully. You do not owe your healing to the people who broke you, and you are never selfish for walking toward your own freedom. If this story has found you at the right moment or reminded you of one you've lived, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your silence, your survival. Share your story in the comments below. If you've ever chosen yourself even once, just type it in, free by choice. Let that be your moment, your declaration, your beginning. And if you'd like to hear more stories of letting go, starting over, and finding peace where it was once denied, subscribe to the channel, share this with someone who needs it, and turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter that could shift something inside you. Thank you for listening, not just to this story, but to your own voice, your own heart. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care and stay free.